Welcome to the Green Building Show, where we investigate green design and building trends throughout Australia.
This week on the Green Building Show, we continue our series on how to plan and build your renovation. I'll be sitting down with Sarah Woods, the owner of project management firm The Middlewoman, who explains the fundamentals of managing your tradies on site once the project's underway. And in this week's Australian Style, I speak with architect David Boyle about his award-winning remarkable renovation. And later in this episode, we'll hear from Light Home's Mark Jones, who's going to bring us the latest Light Home hot design blog. I'm here today with Sarah Wood. She's director of the Middlewoman Services, which is a home service company. Thanks for being with us, Sarah.
It's fine.
So we're talking about how to manage your project and how to manage your tradies specifically. So I guess what's the biggest issue when it comes to managing your renovation project and finding the right tradie for the job?
Well, I think a lot of the problem is that people just ask around and they sort of say who was good and who was right. And that can be good, but not that the person who you talk to is not necessarily the right person for the job. So you might sort of ring up Joe Bloggs, who did some electrical work for someone else, and they say, they're fantastic for them, and then they come to your job and it's a totally different job. So when you're dealing with tradespeople, you need to actually look at the type of work they do. So number one, if you were talking to somebody and saying, look, I'd like you to do the electric work on my owner-builder renovation, you need to make sure that they actually have done a lot of renovation work and they're not just maintenance people.
And how do you ensure that they actually have done their work? Do you have to only go with a tradie if they've got a website? Do you have to ring up some of their previous clients? How do you know what they've done?
Well, I must say the funniest thing is the person who has the least amount of marketing material is usually the best. The one that doesn't have a business card, the one that doesn't have the signage on their car, because they're usually the people that have the most word of mouth. So I would be asking for some other clients that they've worked for. Other businesses probably would be better because they're going to be more honest with you. But of course, when you aren't ringing up about references, you're only going to give references that you know you're going to get a glowing report from. So I'd still be very careful about how you do that.
Okay, great. And in some previous conversations we've had, Sarah, you mentioned that communication between the client and the tradie can often be a bit of a pitfall. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and also some solutions for that?
Look, I think the biggest problem in building in general is communication. Once I used to I communicated with and got a fireman who used to do fences, and I was previously a nurse. So the nurse and the fireman had fantastic communication skills because they had to. It was life and death situation. So with tradespeople, they are human. They haven't necessarily been taught how to communicate correctly. They may have low self-esteem, they may not feel confident in what they do, although they might be a fantastic tradesperson. So you have to consider that they're human and that they have a bad day or a good day, and so do you. So whenever you're speaking to them, you need to be very considerate about, the fact that they've a couple of my tradespeople have got 6 children. So the morning that they've come out of to get to your job at 7:30, it's conceivably chaos, right? And they're 15 minutes late. But to get there, they've done a hell of a lot of things. So if you can greet them with a smiley face and be really polite and sometimes offer them a cup of tea if they look a bit dishevelled, then that starts off the relationship really, really well.
With a company like yours, the Middlewoman, obviously you work as the middle person or the middle woman.
Yeah.
Is there some key communication fundamentals that the client and the tradie have to adhere to? Look,
I really think that you need to respect the tradesperson's knowledge and try and say that you want them to give their honest opinion about what they're going to do for you. Because what they'll do is they'll want to get the work from you and they won't tell you their honest opinion. They'll just say yes to you and they'll say, yes, that colour will look fantastic on the wall. Or they'll say, oh, well, if you like it. And you be ready for those statements and say, look, do you really believe what you're saying there? Would you do it a different way? If it were your house, would you do it this way? And then that sort of gives them a bit of respect, and they'll give you the world. They won't just give you the next 10 minutes worth of experience, they'll give you the last 20 years. And that's what you want. You want someone who's got that experience and is going to give it to you as a, part of your job. It's not just about the hourly rate that they're going to charge you. It's about what they'll give you in that hourly rate.
Fantastic. So I guess, and so it is about trusting the tradie's opinion. And from your professional opinion, what do you think is the most important factor when it comes to managing a renovation as a whole and managing all the different types of tradespeople on the job?
I think communication again. I think a written communication. So if you want someone to do something, then you write it down and you give them a copy and you have a copy. In a building job, you call it a variation or a work order. But even if it can be in a triplicate book where you give one to the tradesperson, put one in a file and keep one in the book.
Okay, so if you've got a really in-depth and thorough brief from the architect or building designer, and everything's specified, how much do you actually have to micromanage the tradie?
Absolutely micromanage them right down to the last thing and check every single thing they've done.
Well, okay, why is that?
Because their interpretation of the written word is very different to the actual practical situation. So tiling a bathroom can be done in a million ways, and you can specify the tile, but you don't necessarily specify exactly where the lines are going to line up. So that becomes quite a personal thing, and it actually is something that happens on the job. So I would say probably 30% of decisions are made on the job. So you can have all that documentation and it can all, in theory, be fine, but people's interpretation of that documentation is another thing again.
Yeah, fantastic. And you've mentioned earlier that you were actually once upon a time an owner builder yourself, and you also mentioned that there was you're still feeling the brunt of some mistakes you made back then.
Absolutely.
I guess what would you do differently now if you could go back? And
I'd use a builder. I'd use myself. I think owner building is a great thing to do if you have a relative or someone who knows about the building industry, or you have a very close friend who's an architect or something like that that's going to advise you on the side, which is what I had. I had a famous architect advising me on the side, and I still made lots of problems, including not waterproofing my bathroom. So 20 years later, it didn't matter in the first 5 years, but after about 5 years of not having a waterproof bathroom, I now have the problems with damp coming through the adjoining walls. So, and I've had pieces of timber that were cut, that were expensive pieces of timber that were cut short, and I had no skills to demand that those bits of timber were replaced. So it requires someone to be extremely assertive, very, very good in design, and very good with the numbers, making and looking at invoices, looking at licenses and all those sorts of things. And everyone says to you, look up the Fair Trading website for licenses, but I still have problems after 10 years looking up and trying to understand what they are actually licensed for. Yeah.
Sarah Wood, thank you for your time.
That's fine.
This week in Hot Design Blogs, we found Desire to Inspire, which is Canada meets Australia. There's two women that have never ever met before, yet they've come together to create this fantastic design blog, being design junkies themselves. Our design junkies, Joe and Kim, blog about anything from interior design to architecture, and they also blog about their own DIY projects. Kim is smack bang in the middle of doing her own DIY kitchen renovation at the moment.
I'm here today with David Boyle. He's the director of David Boyle Architects. Thanks for being with us, David.
That's okay.
Great. We're talking today about the Kelly Residence, which is an upper level addition to a 1980s brick project home. Can you tell us how did this project come about, David?
Well, we were approached by our clients who wanted to explore how they might be able to reuse the existing house and provide some additional accommodation for themselves so that they can, enjoy the holiday area around Copacabana independently as well as with their extended family.
Okay, fantastic. And it's certainly an unusual design, and I understand it's won a few architecture awards. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh yes, we've picked up a couple of awards. The main one, I guess, being from the New South Wales Institute of Architects. We won an architecture award in last year's architecture awards, and it got shortlisted for the national awards as well.
Fantastic. And why do you think why did you choose to use a lightweight material for the upper level addition when the original structure was a heavyweight, such as was brick?
Well, the existing house was a project home, so it was essentially a brick veneer construction. So it was actually a timber supporting frame with an external skin of brickwork for waterproofing reasons. So really, the existing house wouldn't really have coped structurally with a heavy weight construction on the top. So our goals here were really to try and make as minimal intervention to the existing house as possible, and try and gain our clients an elevated upper floor level which sits on top of the existing house.
Okay, and how do you think it's improved the lifestyle of the occupants?
Well, certainly, I guess from our perspective, the house has been transformed from a visual perspective, so it creates a little bit more of a destination point for the owners. The elevated position gives them a much nicer outlook down towards the beach and to the ocean. It has some pretty panoramic views out to the south, out to the headlands. But I think from an emotional perspective, I think it is a much nicer place to visit.
Great. And what lightweight materials did you use, David, and why did you choose them?
Well, the house extension is essentially timber framed. There are a couple of steel beams supporting the large cantilevered deck, but apart from that it's all timber framed. It's clad externally with fibre cement cladding, which then has a series of horizontal Western red cedar cover patterns over the top, and it's lined on the roof with lightweight metal roofing, and on the interior with plywood, panelling and plasterboard.
David Boyle, thank you for your time.
Thanks very much.